Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the Energy Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Ari Whitten, and this weekend I have a very unique treat for you. I have been, quite frankly, busting my buns lately to not only read up on and read all the research on COVID-19, not all the research, certainly it's coming out way faster than anyone can keep up with, but reading a lot of the research that's coming out, talking to a lot of my friends, colleagues in the health space, as well as many experts, and busting my buns interviewing, lining up interviews and interviewing many experts on this topic. And I have a whole bunch of interviews coming to you in the next several weeks. And I'm sure that as the data keeps evolving, I'll keep doing more podcasts on this subject. I want to mention that this week I have 3 podcasts coming out to you with 3 different health experts with different areas of expertise, some different opinions, different ways of delivering their opinions, as you'll see. The reason I wanted to release all 3 of these episodes together is I think they pair really well together, and they give a nice overview of the different perspectives that are out there on what's going on with COVID-19, as well as the different counter arguments to those perspectives. And in many cases, I tried to play devil's advocate or present the opposing view to what the person I'm interviewing believes, and to have them respond to the opposite side's view. And I think I think you'll find these 3 podcasts to be very insightful on a number of levels. Now, I want to give some context before you get into these episodes. Obviously by now we've all been immersed in the news and articles for many weeks related to the coronavirus outbreak. And first of all, I just want to say that, my heart goes out to everyone who is in the middle of this crisis, and who is, people who are losing their lives or friends or family, people who are obviously losing their jobs, or having businesses that they've spent years or decades build go bankrupt. There's a lot of tragic stuff happening right now, and especially the loss of life more than anything. And I really just want to say that before I get into some of the specifics of the data and the different perspectives on this topic. So I wanted to do this introduction to these 3 podcasts to give this context. I've obviously been paying close attention to everything that's happening, reading the research. There's a range of different opinions on this topic. This is a really important thing to understand, is that there isn't just one opinion. There isn't one interpretation of the data. There are big flaws in the data and limitations of the data that we currently have. And therefore, even among highly intelligent experts in infectious disease, for example, and other health experts, there are a range of different interpretations of this data, about what the data mean, as well as a range of different perspectives about what the best solutions are and the pros and cons of those solutions. Now, as far as the range of opinions that I'm hearing, let me try to sort of give a broad overview of the spectrum of opinions that I'm seeing. So some people, including many health experts, many infectious disease experts, believe that this pandemic is likely to have a mortality rate that is not that much different from a severe flu. Now, there's even Anthony Fauci himself, just a few days ago in the New England Journal of Medicine, actually put forth that may be the case, but there are certainly many other researchers and infectious disease experts that have suggested things along those lines. Many people interpret that to mean, in the general public, as well as some health experts, that we should just go back to work. And, that this whole thing of staying indoors is kind of overblown and is fear-mongering and is hype, and that we should just go back to work and not shut down the economy. Now, that's one perspective. The obvious issue with this perspective is that, in the absence of really good data, which, again, we do not have yet, this line of thinking, if we follow it and use that as our guide to a solution, could have terrible consequences. It could cause this virus to spread much faster and potentially cost thousands or tens of thousands more lives than it would have otherwise. So getting things wrong in this direction obviously has severe potential consequences. Now, on the other hand, many people believe that the only reasonable approach to this scenario is to shut everything down, shut the whole economy down, everybody minimize contact with one another, everybody stay home for as long as it takes until this is over, to protect people's lives. And they believe this is the only sensible thing to do to save people's lives. And they believe that anyone who is, concerned over, quote unquote, the economy, over saving people's lives, just doesn't have their priorities straight. Now, this perspective as well is not without flaw. And importantly, I want to point out that this framing of the discussion of saving lives versus money is a false dichotomy. The reality is that we have numerous studies showing that unemployment rates are themselves linked with massive increases in death rates. So let me quote Dr. David Katz here, who is the head of Yale's Prevention Research Center. And he said, quote, "The unemployment, impoverishment, and despair from job loss and bankruptcy, et cetera, that are likely to result will be public health scourges of the first order." Just to emphasize this more, and again, there are many, many studies that have linked economic despair or economic devastation with mortality. But political economist Toby Rogers calls this issue deaths of despair. And these deaths of despair include heart attacks, suicide, alcoholism, homicide, mental health, and prison issues. Now, the point here is that as millions of people lose their jobs, their businesses go bankrupt, tens of thousands of lives, potentially over years, hundreds of thousands of lives are lost as a result of that economic devastation. So this argument is not lives versus money. It's one solution that saves lives in one way and costs lives in another way versus another solution that saves lives in one way and costs lives in another way. It is lives versus lives, in other words. Moreover, I want to mention that many experts are pointing out how, while the lockdown approach would slow the spread of this, it likely won't eliminate it. And we're still going to have to deal with this virus sooner or later. This thing may be around for years. So this is not just a scenario where we stay at home for a few weeks and then expect it to just go away and be gone, and then we resume life as normal. And we also can't stay at home indefinitely and just live life like that. There are consequences from doing that as well. So, these are the range of perspectives and the complexities of this situation. And, for clarity, I want to be clear. I'm not on either side of this debate. I'm not saying, my perspective is one of these ends of the spectrum or the other, nor am I saying that I personally have the answers here. I'm saying that there are many extremely intelligent experts and scientists who are debating these questions and are providing a range of different answers and perspectives to these difficult and very complex problems. Now, what I personally believe is simply that we do not have good enough data yet to know what the right answer is. We need to get better data with widespread accurate testing as quickly as possible. We need to get better data about how many people this is killing and what kind of risk factors lead to higher risk of severe symptoms and death. And with that better data, we need to then take massive action to minimize or eliminate as much death and suffering as possible. And I hope that we can all agree on that. Now, I also want to mention another problem that's going on right now, which is the fact that many people, especially many people who are not actual experts on this topic, believe that they have it all figured out. Now, there's an innate human impulse to believe that you already have all the data you need and you already know, quote unquote, the truth and have the best solutions to everything, and your perspective is the right one. In my opinion, it is a great flaw of the human brain that we are all inclined to arrive at this level of certainty of our views long before we have actually acquired real expertise and all the knowledge of a complex situation like the one we're dealing with right now. My view on this is, unless you're an actual expert on this subject, please resist the urge to be so certain of your views And if you feel certain right now that you have all the right answers to this, that you're right and everyone who doesn't believe what you believe is wrong, that's probably a good indication that you have not thoroughly considered all the harms that may come from your preferred solution and analysis of this situation. So I want to, again, encourage you to resist the urge to believe that you have it all figured out, and to open your mind to listening to the perspectives of experts who may not share all of your views. Hear them out with openness. Please be willing to examine where your own opinions may lead to potential harm that you may not have previously considered. And the last thing that we need right now is to make this whole pandemic situation even worse by slinging insults at one another and getting nasty at one another because they don't share our interpretation of what's going on and the best solution to it. So I really want you to consider that suggestion deeply. Now, my point of all this is, again, right now we're dealing with a very complex, multi-layered problem where basically any and every solution we can come up with will still result in massive harm. This is not a simple problem with a very simple, easy solution. And if you think it is, you are probably underthinking it. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to be bringing you a number of health experts with a range of different opinions on this COVID-19 pandemic and what they believe are the best solutions to this issue. Now, no doubt some of the people that I'll interview you'll agree with, and some you may not, or some you may agree with some of their views and not some of their other views. I would really love to facilitate a more calm and rational discussion and debate on this topic. And if you believe someone is misguided in their views, someone I'm interviewing, for example, I'd love to hear from you. You can comment on the YouTube videos, you can comment on the podcast page on theenergyblueprint.com, or even send me an email to ari@theenergyblueprint.com, and I will happily read your feedback and your arguments as to why you disagree and why you think that person's perspective is wrong. And if you have any suggestions of someone else that I should interview to bring in a different perspective or counter argument to someone you believe is not correct in their assessment or is not presenting the most optimal solution, then please give me those suggestions. I'm really just trying to provide the best information on this topic possible with, I would say my bias is in the direction of trying to empower you to understand that probably the single best thing that you can do to deal with this situation that we have right now is to improve your own health by focusing on nutrition and lifestyle. And that is a central theme that I try to come back to again and again with these different experts that I'm interviewing. And that's really my big goal of providing all this information to you. And I believe that the data supports that perspective as well. And I think you'll see why as you listen to these interviews. So again, I'm releasing 3 podcast episodes this weekend on COVID-19 with a range of different perspectives. And I want to suggest that you listen to the podcast with Dr. Tom Moorcraft first as the best place to start. Dr. Moorcraft is an infectious disease expert who gives really a wonderful and pretty balanced overview of this whole pandemic and proposed solutions with a lot of nuance and a lot of care to present all sides and all the different perspectives. I've also interviewed an MD who has been a pioneer in preventive and natural medicine in the US for over 50 years. And he focuses really on what you can do to improve your own health right now and really, kind of empowering you to understand that the best thing you can do right now is take charge of your lifestyle habits to improve your overall metabolic health as a way to reduce your risk of severe symptoms or death from this infection. And I also interview an MIT PhD who's an expert in systems biology and immune function, as well as he brings in a discussion of the more political and economic aspects of the situation. Now, I really want to encourage you to listen to all 3 of these podcasts, which give you a really nice range of different perspectives about the situation that we're going through. And this also applies, by the way, to the podcast I released a couple weeks ago with Dr. Guillermo Ruiz on how to boost your immune health to help prevent or fight off viral infections. And with all of that said, I really hope that you guys will enjoy all of these episodes. And I hope most of all that you will feel empowered by this information and that you will take away from it, as I said, optimism that you can decrease your likelihood of getting severe symptoms or dying by taking charge of your own health right now with your nutrition and lifestyle habits. And more than anything else, of all the details, all the nuances that are discussed in these different podcast episodes, that's the big takeaway I really want to leave with you above all else. So with all of that said, enjoy the episodes. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Energy Blueprint Podcast. I'm your host, Ari Whitten, and today I have with me for the second time my childhood physician and my family physician growing up for 30 plus years. I've been seeing this dog. I mean, not very often recently, but now I take my kids to see him. He's a pioneer and well-known expert in the field of preventive medicine and integrative medicine and clinical nutrition. He owns the distinction of being the first medical doctor to enter the field of preventive medicine in Southern California and is a board-certified physician and surgeon with over 30 years of clinical experience as a practicing primary care physician. Lots and lots more credentials. I could tell you, he graduated Phi Beta Kappa from the University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine, which was the first Ivy League medical school. He is literally one of the first physicians in the United States to enter this field of preventive medicine. He's completed his internship at UCLA and served 2 years in his surgical residency at the University of California, San Diego. He's widely recognized as one of the leading authorities in health, wellness, and metabolic nutrition for decades now. And he's really, as I said, just a pioneer in this field of preventive medicine before it became well known. So he reached out to me the other day with all this coronavirus stuff going on and said we should do a podcast with an important message that people need to hear amidst all this panic. And I agree with what he's about to share with you. And so I thought this was a very important message to share as well. So I wanted to have him back on the show. So welcome again for podcast number 2, Dr. Meltzer.
All right, thanks so much. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for all that great introduction and everything. And I am very proud and fond of you as well, and looking forward to sharing some thoughts with your audience today.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. I know you have limited time today. So we have this epidemic of coronavirus. The whole world is in basically lockdown or what's the proper term? Shelter in place that they're calling it in the United States. Lockdown, more strict lockdown in a lot of other countries. There's widespread fear and panic. A lot of people are getting sick. The numbers are rising exponentially every day. There's some scary data coming out about this situation. There's talk of a vaccine in place. What's sort of, before we get into like kind of the practical aspect of it, what's your sort of take on the broad landscape of what's going on right now?
Well, what's going on right now is something that happens periodically every 10 to 20 years and probably will continue to happen as long as civilization exists, is that viruses sometimes come from different cultures, often from the Oriental culture, sometimes from other cultures. But the point is that I think what's happening is that it's a call to understanding, it's a call to consciousness. Because what's basically implied is that the virus is more powerful than the person. What's developing. See, what I need people to get out of this discussion here is that along your strategies to overcome the virus, the strategies are not just outside in, the strategies are also inside out. So self-empowerment ultimately, and self-vaccination ultimately, or vaccination, which I prefer self-vaccination, but some type of stimulation for antibody-formation will be the only way to really end a viral outbreak. So what I want to make clear to folks is 2 things. Number one, they have more power than they're being told they have. They have more power because when they develop and cultivate their immune power, just like a country developing its military. Your immune system is another word for your defense or your military, or your ability to defend yourself against foreign invasion, toxins, viruses, what have you. So I need people to know that number one, it's very scary out there. It's kind of like a fear demic almost. But let's get to the facts. Number one, There's no virus stronger than a healthy, there's no virus stronger than a healthy, happy, strong, vibrant person, period. That's number one. Now, what people need to know is that they need to empower themselves with ways to boost their immune system on a regular basis. So when a crisis shows up, it's not like you build a well when you find out there's a drought. It's important to cultivate. And I use the word cultivate like you would develop a garden or develop a skill, like play the piano or become a musician or something, or a surgeon, cultivate skills. And we'll go into some of these skills later. But the big picture is this: the solution is in your hands, not in washing your hands. Let me make a distinction here. There's a big distinction between the spread of the virus and immunity to the virus. So most public officials are working on the outside in. They're trying to stop the spread of the virus. Now, let's look at that. The virus is in 100 countries. Geez, that doesn't seem like a really effective containment to me. And I believe they have slowed down the velocity of the virus, because just like, when you're sailing, you can't stop the wind, but you can trim your sails, if you will, and adjust things, windbreakers, etc. But, I believe this is an airborne virus. I believe this is also a virus that can travel from a fecal oral route, meaning it can go from in homeless situations or dense situations where a lot of infections transfer from, the fecal to the oral route. So I don't think everything is super clear, but I can tell you this: if you're 6 feet from somebody and the wind comes up, I was out at the beach the other morning and I was doing my swim, which I had to get there before any officials were there, let's put it that way. And I had a towel, and it was so windy that the towel went down the beach about 50 feet to go get it. Well, a virus is 1/100th to 1/200th the size of a bacterium. So if it was sitting on my towel, it probably went 5,000 feet, if you get my point. Right. So let's be real about this. Don't be afraid of the virus. Don't let people think that if they get out and catch the virus, it's over. No, that's not true. What's true is this: is that the virus will, find a virus is like a parasite, it's like a bandit. It needs your RNA to live. So when it's outside of your body, it's called a virion. When it gets into your body, it becomes viral, and it tries to attack your cell membranes and gets through your cell membranes. So first it has to attach, then it has to penetrate your cell membranes, then infiltrate in the nucleus, and then inflame the RNA. That's how they test it. But my point is this: by that time, a powerful immune system has taken it out. Your body has T cells and beta cells. Your T cells have cytotoxic powers. Your beta cells can produce antibodies. So what I'm trying to explain is this: the strategy has got to be both. You want to slow down the spread of the virus. I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to that, with a couple of caveats, because I do think the healthcare facilities can be overloaded by an epidemic. However, the doctors who are public health, that's it. They're disease doctors, they're public health doctors, they're epidemiologists. I don't think they've ever seen a patient. You see, people come in different shapes and sizes. Some are high risk for illness, some are medium risk for illness. As a matter of fact, I tell my patients, you have 5 choices, okay? You got a medium risk for long-term illness, high risk, low risk, very high, very low. So those are your 5 choices: medium risk, high, low, very high, very low. Well, depending on your risk, if it's very low, you have essentially no risk to this virus. If it's low, you might get a couple of sniffles. If it's medium, you might get a cold or so. If it's, more higher, you might get the flu or bronchitis. But unless you have a chronic illness or chronic burnout, you're not going to wind up in a very sick situation. All the people that so far I can see from other physicians that I've spoken to and communicated with, that the morbidity, in other words, mortalities, are associated with comorbidities: diabetics, people with chronic lung disease, people with chronic heart disease. People have lived a life of self-abuse or self-direction. Remember, wellness is a choice in 2020. 1970, 1980 wasn't a choice. Now it's a choice. So, I feel for those people, and I certainly want to support them. But my point is, it's just, when you're not well, it's self-induced. It's not brought on by anybody else. And when you overcome the virus, it's got to come from you. Now, you make contact with that virus. You have T cells. You have beta cells. It's just like if you were called up and, someone said, hey, you're the president. We have terrorists at the Canadian border. What would you do? Well, you would mobilize your military to get to the border. Well, if the terrorists got through the border, what does that say about your military? So it's about your military. So you want to slow down the exposure to the virus. I can understand that for healthcare facilities, but you can't hide from the virus. You can't, don't touch me, don't shake my hand, sterilize everything, saponify everything, detergent everywhere, spend millions of dollars. No. The only way this thing's going to, the medical term for it is called herd immunity, HERD. In other words, when everybody gets exposed and their body produces antibodies naturally, because that's what a vaccine is. Remember, folks, remember this. All a vaccine is an attenuated form of the virus to stimulate you to produce the antibodies that you can produce yourself. So now where is the respect? Where is the acknowledgement of individuality and self-respect? We don't have a choice. Stay home and then we'll get a vaccine. Where's the person come in here? That's what I'm trying to explain. You know, we've lost the human touch in our medical care. Now, people have burnout and inflammation are the same. Let me explain. A virus is a predator. It looks for prey. That's what it looks for. If you ever watch the Discovery Channel, you see the lions are hanging out, and then they see a herd of buffaloes, a herd of wildebeest or zebras go by, and they pretend to attack. And what happens? Well, the herd moves, but then the weak ones or the ones that have a bad leg stay behind. Well, guess who they go after? So the virus is going to predate on inflammatory tissue. What does that mean? Well, people that are stressed out, people that are burnt out, people that are tired, people that are overworked, people that are not happy, people that are depressed, people that are overweight, people that eat inflammatory foods. I mean, come on now, that's where you get inflammation. So you get first degree burnout, second degree, third degree burnout, meaning you have some risk based on your inflammation level. So if you keep your inflammation level low, we're going to produce herd immunity. The ones that have some inflammation, they're the burnout nobody wants to pay attention to or acknowledge, they'll get over it. And the people who are really chronically ill need to be separated away. They're the ones that need to be quarantined to minimize what's going on. Because see, if you and I are immune, everybody we party with is immune, it doesn't matter. But the paranoia is the way it is right now. I don't know, any sporting events or any kind of congregations or any kind of musical events or concerts or any kind of graduations or anything where people would want to be near anybody because they all think if you catch the virus, you got to catch the virus and kick its butt.
I want to come back to that point. Now, there's a lot in what you just said, a lot we could dig into further. I want to give some statistics on, kind of the risk factors for this virus. So for having severe symptoms from this virus, I should say. So there was a meta-analysis just published a few days ago from 30 studies in China. I'm kind of skeptical of a lot of the stuff coming out of China, but this is pretty much the best data we have right now. So they found that people 50 years and older have 250% increased risk to get a severe case of COVID-19. Males, just being the male gender, they have 1.3 times higher risk. Smoking increases the risk by 1 to 2 times. Pre-existing conditions such as high blood pressure, diabetes, and cardiovascular disease increase the risk by 2 to 3 times. So very much in line with what you're saying. Also, I'll mention the data from Italy is that something like 98 or 99% of the deaths that they have had there are from people who have had at least one, if not 2 or 3 comorbidities, pre-existing conditions.
Right. So
however, there's one other thing that, people I'm seeing, some of the doctor friends of mine are saying, some of the people on the front lines in New York, they're saying, basically, don't get too cocky about being young and healthy, because we're seeing young, healthy people in the ICU as well who have no pre-existing conditions, who are perfectly young and healthy. And so what are your thoughts on that situation?
Let's get something clear. Let's forget about young or old or 50, okay? There's a warranty on most human bodies till about 40. So most people can have self-dysfunctional or self-defeating habits till 40 or so. Muscle maintenance, maybe in this current culture, maybe it's 35 or 32 now. But, in my day, it was 40, where you could pretty much do anything you wanted to at 40. And if you drank, smoked, ate poorly, didn't exercise, whatever, you could reverse it and still be okay. And, because the warranty on the machine comes off about 40. Now, I believe that the risk for the virus is directly related to your level of inflammation. Now, let's translate. People with chronic illness, what's their level of inflammation?
Higher, obviously.
High. Not high. They have chronic illness. See, most people can be highly inflamed and live in burnout. Most people live in burnout. Let's distinguish. There's wellness, there's disease in the other corner. We're war on disease, wellness, and then 85% burnout. Ongoing fatigue, stress, weight gain, anxiety, restlessness, tension, the American lifestyle. It's a burnt out lifestyle. You got to be around for a while to get it. It takes about 40 years to expose yourself to all the stress of relationships and finances and people and growth and what have you, and dealing with the culture. When you're young, it bounces off of you. Now, what about young people that have asthma? What about young people that have chronic lymphocytic leukemia? What about young people that don't take care of themselves, that are in burnout? I don't think a person as strong and well can get this virus. It just doesn't work. Now, maybe there is one situation in a million, okay? I'm not, life has got its miracle moments, okay? But as a physician, as a success coach, as a doctor, you make choices based on probabilities, not on possibilities. And the overwhelming probability, see, they don't acknowledge inflammatory food. They don't acknowledge that most saturated fats, most animal foods, caffeine, alcohol, sugar, white foods, soft drinks, Cokes, they don't want to acknowledge that as inflammatory food. And they don't want to measure people's stress levels. They want to take a test for your antigen to see if you have coronavirus, but they're not checking your serum happiness level. They're not checking your serum stress level. They might check your weight, and we know that people that have metabolic sluggishness are much higher risk. But in my experience with the virus is something like this: when you have a lot of inflammation and you clog your lymphatic system, and your filters are clogged, and you don't have a strong internal military directly with your T cells and your beta cells, you could get infected. Okay, but again, unless you're high risk, you're going to get over it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We have a quiz on the MakeTimeForWellness.com website. I want to encourage your listeners to check it out. The 20-question quiz on your risk for burnout, or it gives you an idea how much inflammation there is in your life. So just check it out and make sure that you make some corrections to reduce your level of inflammation. And the two main sources of inflammation are emotional stress and nutritional toxicity. So if you can work on those two things, just improving your nutrition gradually and working on either becoming more mindful or do yoga or meditate or go more into your spiritual beliefs or whatever, to get meditated, more peaceful, create more harmonious relationships with friends and loved ones, and create more harmony, because this is one of the backslides of the lockdown, a sedentary, overweight, inflammatory eating, high stress, anxiety, depressed culture doesn't build a strong military. See, so they don't want to deal with that. So they don't want to acknowledge you as a person, everybody's at the same risk. No, not everybody has the same risk. There might be some exceptions to any rule. Or, as a doctor, you may have seen things that you could never expect. Sometimes it happens. But more than ever, people with diabetes have chronic inflammation. People with chronic heart disease have built-up chronic inflammation. People with emphysema have chronic inflammation. People with Parkinson's or dementia have chronic inflammation. So the virus is a predator. It preys on inflammation. So if you have less inflammation in your body because you're less stressed, you manage life more effectively, you get a better balance, and you don't put nutritional toxins in your body that commercialize artificial foods that actually inundate the airway in between all this concern about the virus, all this concern about stopping the virus, and then you can commercialize all the food that's on the airways in between these, CNN and the Fox News is 2/3 of the food that they put out there is highly inflammatory. So there's such a contradiction. But my point is, you can empower yourself. You can build your immune system. I have an old saying in the clinic: a cold shower a day keeps the virus at bay. In the first hour of the day, charge your battery. The immune system's a chargeable battery. If your battery on your phone is 50%, it still works. The battery on your body is 50%, it's fatigued. You got to charge your battery every day, first hour of the day. Now, high doses of vitamins C are antiviral, 10,000 up to 6 to 10,000 milligrams a day. If you want to protect yourself, okay? The other thing you can do is you can take astragalus, Astragalus. It's in fact a Chinese antiviral or immune booster. But again, if you're following the routine of exercising, meditating, being loving and purposeful, avoiding inflammatory foods, you have nothing to worry about. Now, what you have to be concerned about is you got to get out there and help people build up this immune system. In other words, it's important that we have herd immunity.
I want to come back to that point in a second. I want to wrap up with that, this issue of containment versus herd immunity. And there's an important distinction there that I think a lot of people don't get. And I know this is a central message for what you want to communicate. I want to just go into one other side topic, which is the issue of hospital overwhelm. There is, we've kind of accepted at this point, we're beyond the point of containment. This is spreading, whether we like it or not.
The wind travels, yes.
Yes. And the issue now is to flatten the curve, to decrease the rate of spreading such that we don't overwhelm hospitals and have
Right. Right.
a huge death toll as a result of people
I
not being
agree.
able to get hospital treatment, be put on ventilators in the intensive care unit, et cetera. Interestingly, I've been digging in for the last couple days to try to find data on survival rates of people with acute respiratory distress syndrome from COVID-19 who are put on ventilators, and the data really does not look good at all. I was talking to a couple doctor friends of mine as well about this data, and they were really depressed to see this. But I had been kind of under the impression that like 10 to 15% of the population who gets this might need hospital care, be put on ventilators, et cetera, and then survive. And so even though 10 to 15% of people are being hospitalized from severe symptoms, only, let's say, about 1% roughly, by the best estimates, although that number's shifting, 1% of people are dying, which kind of assumes that, hey, there's 90+% of these people who are being put on ventilators are surviving. The data that I've seen, and there's a few studies on this, there's some data out of China as well as some US data, but basically what it's showing is that people who are put on mechanical ventilation, about over 90% of them are actually dying.
Okay, so there's a contradiction of facts here. Is that correct?
So not necessarily a contradiction, but I guess kind of a contradiction. But what I'm saying is, it doesn't. It's
Can I sort it
unclear
out?
to me how big of an issue it is that if we can't get people on ventilators, when by these estimates that I'm looking at right now, and I'm happy, I'll link to this study below the show notes for this episode, 92 to 97% of people who are put on mechanical ventilation end up dying.
Yeah, okay. That's probably closer to my observation, okay? And the reason I say that is that, you see, here's a situation. As conventional doctors, now again, I don't look at myself, I'm a doctor, but I've shifted into prevention, of course. The doctors are downstream taking the wounded bodies out of the river. The upstream doctors like myself are trying to keep the wounded bodies from getting in the river. The medical profession has a responsibility to take care of those that are ill. But all these years, it also has a responsibility to educate the public on self-empowerment, how to be well, so that they're not at high risk for these kind of things. Now, what you're describing is this. The virus, one thing about the coronavirus, it has a higher RO ratio, which means it can spread quicker. But once it gets past pneumonia, once you go from first you get a cold, then you have an upper respiratory tract infection, and then you might have a little bronchitis, okay? Once it goes past cough and bronchitis, goes into pneumonia, it can go quickly into respiratory failure. So how many people are you going to save from respiratory failure? Well, probably less, and you're going to prevent getting into respiratory failure. So that's a different issue for another day. But again, if you want to help these people, you want to stop the overload, you can let the low-risk people out. Keep the high-risk people quarantined, the ones on prescription drugs, on chronic medication, who've had a chronic underdeveloped immune system by choice, and partially by accepting the medical profession telling you that drugs are going to heal you rather than teaching you how to empower yourself. Yeah. But those people need to be quarantined. The rest of the herd needs to come out, get back to work and live a life, and get back to living. Otherwise, the next time there's a Padre game or a football game, you're going to have to be tested for the virus and not 6 to 90 by 6 feet. You're going to think if you catch it. No, you have to be exposed to the virus, make contact with it, and overcome it through your own self-empowerment. Now, if you don't have the best immune system, you probably, with 9 out of 10 possibility, you'll still overcome it, but you'll have cough or flu. You know how many people we lose to the flu every year? Let's look some real numbers. How many people did we lose to the flu last year in this country?
I believe it's usually somewhere around 40,000, 60,000, somewhere in there.
Okay. It's a high rate, okay? It's an extremely high rate. And some 35 million people get the flu. And about 35,000, 2 years ago, we had 59,000 deaths. So it may be comparable, in the long run, something like that. But again, what's the message I want to get out there? It's not in washing your hands. It's in your hands and how you take care of your lifestyle, how you charge your batteries, how you think, how you eat, your mind-body connection. Fear and stress aggravate your immune system. Fear and stress are inflammatory. Don't be afraid of this thing. If your inflammation level is too high, you figure it out from the quiz or whatever, then improve your exercise routine. Eat better. Pick one thing every day you can eat better at. One thing every day you eat less of. Make some adjustments. trim the sails, and let's get back to living and not be afraid of anything, or afraid of our neighbors, or afraid of our loved ones, or afraid of people. We got to make wellness a value and move forward with strong immune system. Now we can cultivate that.
To this point, I want to get back to this issue and of containment and flattening the curve and actually resolving this situation. So there's a gap, there's a distinction between those two things. I think a lot of people right now are basically quarantining themselves at home. They're afraid of this thing. I see people walking in the streets. They get scared whenever they walk near somebody. They cover their mouth with their sweater or whatever. People, I think a lot of people are just kind of thinking, hey, I'm just going to stay locked inside my house for as long as it takes for the medical establishment to develop a vaccine or a cure for this thing. And then once there's a cure, then I can come out and not live in fear all the time. What do you think of that sort of paradigm versus, and what do you think is the real solution here?
The solution is you have to play to win and stop trying to play not to lose, okay? The vaccine is 12 to 18 months away. In best hands, it will be only effective against the current coronavirus, which will invariably mutate by the time the next vaccine is out. So you can't count on the vaccine. The vaccine works by making your own antibodies. Count on yourself, self-vaccination. That's the point. The only way you're going to end this thing is that you and I and everybody else around us is immune to the virus, and the virus has nowhere to go, so it dies. I think the containment has to be continued because of the high risk of our sad state of our affairs, which is we're a population of many chronically inflamed people. So based on that, we have to be careful because those people are at risk. Now, the people that are well are not at risk. They can go out. They're not, they're okay. Let them get out there. They've already taken out the virus. They're not shedding at this point. They shed, that's another misnomer. They act like when you're symptomatic, you're shedding more virus. You probably shed more virus right before you actually become symptomatic, and you're most contagious before you're symptomatic. So this idea of tracking you down when you're symptomatic and then finding everybody in your neighborhood or your genealogy that you touch base with, no, you're playing not to lose. It's a play to win. Empower the people. It's in your hands. It's not, wash your hands. I don't have objection to washing your hands, but, decrease the dose of exposure. I'm okay with that. But the future of your relationship with this coronavirus is not washing your hands, in your hands. So I think the general public, the low-risk people who are well-adjusted, healthy, exercise, eat well, feel good, energetic, young, whatever age, let them come out. And let's quarantine the people who are high risk until they settle this hospital thing down. And then going forward, let's make the healthcare profession a lot healthier, be accountable to be healthy, and make the health and welfare departments in general, surgeon generals, become more aware of self-empowerment and not think of a vaccine, which is going to do what your body can do naturally, is your solution.
I mentioned this to you yesterday when we spoke on the phone, but there was an interview that I saw of Paul Offit recently, who's probably, he's an author of textbooks, medical textbooks on vaccines. He's probably the most pro-vaccine person that you'll ever meet. He owns a patent on vaccine. He makes money off vaccines. He actually said that if a coronavirus vaccine came out very rapidly, I think he said something even in the next year, he himself would not take it because, first of all, I think there's animal studies on a coronavirus vaccine showing that actually it gave worse outcomes. But also he mentioned specifically that there needs to be years worth of safety studies on vaccines before they're released to the public. And so if the most staunch advocate of vaccines in the world is saying, hey, I don't want to take this vaccine if it's rushed out, like there should probably be some caution advised for the rest of us.
Okay, so let's wrap it up. So here's the solution. The solution is either self-vaccination or vaccination. Now, the second one is long to come by, and experts are saying it could be hazardous. The first one has no hazard. And all it requires is taking better care of yourself. Taking the first hour a day to charge your battery, exercise your body and mind every day, avoid eating inflammatory foods and junk and things you don't need to eat, get a purposeful, balanced life going, share your love and service with others, and be strong and brave, and let's face the virus and kick its damn butt. But if
Beautiful.
we run away from this thing and afraid of friends and touch, and, oh, gee, I didn't even want to go out in public. I'm going to give it to my uncle. No. You go out there and beat the virus, and the virus has nowhere to go. If your uncle has illness, he stays in. Don't you stay in. You go out and back. Because what will happen is not only will we not beat the virus the way they're playing it now, we'll slow down the transmission of it, like you say, the spread. But slowing the spread doesn't offer immunity. Immunity comes from self-guided antibodies. And the vaccine is going to try to do what you can do naturally. So think about it. Self-vaccination is a solution. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Dr. Meltzer, thank you so much for coming on the show again. Really, really enjoyed this talk. I think probably most importantly of all, in this world that's gripped with fear and panic right now, I think this message is one of optimism and hope and empowerment.
And exactly. I want folks to know that they can overcome the virus. They have the power. The government and the officials can do outside work. Let them do their work. But the ultimate power to overcome the virus and achieve immunity is in your hands and your life choices. Go take my quiz on maketimeforwellness.com. There are 20 questions. Check out your level of inflammation and risk of burnout, and then look in the mirror and make some adjustments. And good luck. And however I can be supportive, let me know.
Beautiful. And if somebody is interested in working with you directly, is there a good place for them to reach out
on
to
the
you?
website, show you where to call and how to get a hold of us.
Okay. Beautiful.
If somebody wants to have their immune system evaluated at an individual level, that's what I do. And
Beautiful.
my work is to help people build immune power. But see, I think we all as a nation have to build immune power. You don't build a well when there's a drought. So the message is going forward, everybody's got to pick it up, right?
Yeah, 100%. Dr. Meltzer, thank you so much for coming on the show again, and hope to talk to you again very soon.
Buddy, thank you so much.
Hey there, this is Ari again. One more quick thing before you go. Just make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, The Energy Blueprint, and also make sure to subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform, whether that's iTunes or Stitcher or anything else. I hope you guys enjoyed this interview, and I will see you again next week.